Okay, welcome everyone to the March 16th meeting of the Missoula Consolidated Planning Board. If we could please have the call to order.
Certainly. Sean McCoy.
Here.
Sean McCoy is present. Dave Loomis.
Here.
Dave Loomis is present. Micah Sewell.
Here.
Micah Sewell is present. Andy Mefford is absent. Josh Schrader.
Here.
Josh Schrader is present. Neva Hassanen has a conflict and couldn't make it tonight. She is absent. Toon Pham.
Here.
Toon Pham is present. Shane Morrissey.
Here.
Shane Morrissey is present. Jim Bichond.
Here.
Jim Bichond is present. Caroline Lauer.
Here.
Caroline Lauer is present. Vince Caristo.
Here.
Caristo is present. Mr. Chair, there are 7 members and 2 alternates present. Would you like to appoint both alternates as regular voting members tonight?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, next item is approval of the minutes from our last meeting on March 2nd. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at them. Are there any comments or revisions that members would like to propose or a motion to approve?
Move that we approve.
Thank you, Shane. Is there a second for Shane's motion? Jim seconds. All in favor of approving the minutes from March 2nd, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the minutes pass. Next up is public comment from members of the public who'd like to speak on items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if anyone who's joining us tonight would like to speak to us on an item that's not on the agenda, the instructions here are on the Zoom screen. For those of you calling in by phone, if you'd like to make a public comment, please press *6 to raise your hand. We'll know that you'd like to comment. When it's your turn to speak, you'll use *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Great. So, and for folks who've joined in in the Zoom platform, please use the raise hand function on the bottom on the bottom right of your screen to indicate your desire to speak, and we'll call on you in the order that I see them. So we do have several people who've joined as attendees tonight. So I'll go on mute for a couple minutes here and let folks who'd like to speak find the raise hand function or press *9 on their phone. So with that, we'll give a couple minutes here. Okay, seeing no indications that anyone would like to speak tonight, I will move on to the next item, which is staff announcements. So we have one announcement tonight from the county. There is an upcoming training on April 7th in the evening, which is a date that we do not have a board meeting that's available to all board members, put on by the local government center out of both MSU and Bozeman. It's an annual training for as long as I've been in Missoula, offered to all members of boards and commissions and also staff members. And I can't really recommend it highly enough. I've attended twice now. And if you're interested in learning or have about the mechanics of boards and commissions, or have questions about things like public meeting laws or Robert's Rules of Order, the person who puts it on is a real expert in this, Dan Clark. And I highly recommend it. If you're interested, please attend. I think the information was included in our packet for tonight. So we'll move on to the public hearings tonight. We have one public hearing, a rezone on Defoe and Shakespeare and Burton Streets. Several properties, lots there, will be presented by Alex at the City of Missoula. So Alex, please take it away.
Thank you very much. Let me pull up the slides here. Can you all hear me okay? And can we see the slides okay?
Yep.
Correct. Oh. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. My name is Alex Idem. I'm an associate planner with Development Services, and I'm here this evening to go over a rezone request that was submitted by Paul Forsting, who's also here with Image Corps on behalf of the property owners Westside Village LLC. And the rezone is of several properties. The legal description, to keep it short, is lots 1 through 10 in block 61 of the school addition. And the rezone is specific. Current zonings are T2.7 2-unit townhouse, and the request is to go to B1-1 for neighborhood business. Here's the physical locations of the properties outlined in blue. So it's the entire block. Defoe Street's to the north, Burton's to the west, and then Shakespeare, and then it's just north of the alley for the entire block. The current zoning, as I said, is RT 2.7, so that the gray area is also to the west and the south of the property. This is the 2-unit townhouse zoning district. And then to the north and the east is the pink area. That's M1R-2 zoning district, and that's an industrial zoning district. And just again, the request is for B1-1 for neighborhood business. Here's kind of a zoning comparison breakdown of the two. So the RT 2.7 existing and B1-1 proposed. The building types allowed in RT 2.7 are detached houses, 2-unit townhouses, and 2-unit houses. B1-1 allows for all building types for residential, so single-purpose residential, multi-dwellings, 2-unit or 3-unit houses, and as well as mixed-use buildings. The minimum parcel area requirement in RT 2.7 and B1-1 is 3,000 square feet. And then the area required per dwelling unit in RT 2.7 is 2,700 square feet. But in B1-1, it's only 1,000 square feet requirement. The setbacks in RT 2.7 is going to be 20 feet for the front and rear, 5 feet for the side interior, and then 10 feet for the street side. And the B1-1 has no setback requirement. So along Shakespeare, Defoe, Burton, and then the alley, there's no setback requirement needed. For RT 2.7, the height allowed is 30 or 35 feet, depending on the roof pitch. And the max height in B1-1 is 40 feet allowed. The units per acre for RT 2.7 is up to 16 dwelling units per acre, and the B1-1 is up to 43 dwelling units per acre. And just for comparison purposes, the subject properties are roughly 38,985 square feet, which would allow a maximum dwelling unit for the RT 2.7 to 14. But the B1-1 would allow up to 38 dwelling units per acre. So the growth policy map, the subject properties, again in blue, are located in the orange area, and that's the neighborhood mixed use land use designation. And this land use designation is intended to distinguish, create, maintain, and enhance areas that already provide local services within a neighborhood, and promote uses such as retail, eating and drinking, office, and medium to high residential density. The current relatable zoning districts in this land use designation are what's being requested is the B1-1 for neighborhood business. The other ones are B2-1 and B2-2 for community business. And then the last one's M1R-2 for limited industrial residential. All of these permit a variety of commercial uses and residential density of up to 43 dwelling units per acre. And on the left side is the green area, and that's a land use designation of residential medium high density. So the growth policy calls for a focused inward approach to encourage infill development in urban core where infrastructure already exists, and also to promote a mixed use, increased density, and enhanced connectivity while limiting the sprawl and promoting efficient use of existing infrastructure. So on the the image to the right is the properties highlighted in blue on the top of the image. And so just a couple of things to point out. 2 blocks to the south off of Shakespeare Street is Lowell Grade School. And just adjacent to that is Westside Park. Along West Broadway and Toole Avenue are a variety of different commercial uses. And I'll just point out to the kind of in the bottom right there is the Missoula Fresh Market off Broadway. And that is less than 3/4 of a mile away from the subject property. And over to the left is a snip from the Mountain Line map. The subject is located in the little star area. So the Mountain Line 2 is the red route that goes along Phillips Street, and that's just 2 blocks south of the subject properties. Further south of that is Route 11 and 14, and there's various stops along that, and that's about 1/2 mile away. And then there's the Scott Street Route 3 that has a bus stop that's 1/2 mile away as well. So here, just some various images. That's the existing site conditions right now from images from Defoe Street, the corner of Defoe and Burton, Shakespeare Street and Burton Street. As you can see, there's mostly pretty well established landscape boulevards and sidewalks for the subject property, except for a little bit of the portion on Shakespeare Street. And here's what the applicant submitted as a preliminary proposed development plan. The bottom right is kind of a basic site plan that the route they think they want to go. You can see there's a variety of 1 and 2 unit houses here. This plan specifically calls out about 24 units proposed at this time. And then the images are kind of just giving a visual of the route they think they might want to go in terms of what that might look like on the site itself. So the review criteria for a rezone is the first one. It needs to comply with the growth policy. And so the B1-1 neighborhood business zoning district is more closely aligned with the growth policy recommendations for the density than the current RT 2.7 zoning district. The second criteria is to facilitate public services and transportation. So rezoning in this area is also served by public water and sewer, sidewalks, public transit, public roads, and schools. The third criteria is to promote compatible urban growth. And this rezone will facilitate a mixed use development. And the fourth criteria, to promote public health and safety. The rezoning in this area is providing an increase in development in areas that would have or already have emergency services established, law enforcement, and fire protection. And the last one is to consider district character and sustainability of the use. And this rezone considers the character because the B1-1 allowed building types are similar to the surrounding areas at this point in time, and it allows access to urban infrastructure services. So the recommended motion from city staff is to approve the adoption of an ordinance to rezone the subject properties. I won't list them all out. They're legally described as lots 1 through 10 in block 61 of the school edition, located in section 16, township 13 north and range 19 west, from RT 2.7 to unit townhouse to B1-1 neighborhood business. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Hi there. Can you all hear me? Okay, I had a very poorly timed technical problem. I'm sorry. Thank you for the presentation, Alex. Is there a presentation from the developer here? I see here, Paul.
Yes, thanks, Vincent. Paul Forsting, IMEG Corporation. I'm here today on behalf of the application. You'll notice there's a couple other Paul Forstings here. That's a byproduct of me sharing the link to the group that's attending today. With me today is Kent Means from MMW. He's the project architect. also is Rebecca and Chrissa Veldy. And Rebecca shows up as Paul and Chrissa shows up as Westside Village LLC. And maybe your other sister, I can't remember her name, she's here too, as well as Westside Westside Village LLC.
That's Libby.
Libby. All right. Yep. Libby. So we got the whole team. Rebecca and Chrissa and Libby are all property owners. They're a family team who's done this before. The pictures that were shown were from another project that they worked on and that they liked. And so the concept has been done before. They're excited to repeat what they've had success with before working on this project. I had a presentation. Almost all of it was duplicated by Alex. The one thing, but I did provide it. So there's only one real exhibit I'd like to show from that presentation, and I'm not sure how I get to it. I provided it to Donna, and I think it's in the record. Can I share my screen? Is that possible? I'll push the button. Just let me know how I'm doing. I just pushed the button to share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, we can see it. Thanks.
All right, great. I wasn't sure if that would work. All right, good. Well, what we're looking at here is an updated version of that site plan. And you're not going to, the buildings are in almost, yep. Oh, sorry. The buildings are in almost identical locations. What you'll see is we have some connected units here, and that was a change that's a more recent change that's just an adaptation of our layout. So we had a neighborhood meeting for this project, and we presented the other layout that you just provided, Alex. And just in interest of full disclosure, we've had an updated layout here, and it although it looks very similar, it does change how the buildings will get constructed. Not the unit count though. The unit count still comes up to 24 based on my math. We did have a neighborhood meeting for this project. We did it in the summer, back in June. We did it. We hope it's unusual to have a neighborhood meeting for a rezone application. It's not a requirement. It's just something we wanted to do in interest of getting ahead of the project, making sure we could communicate to the neighborhood what we were going to do. There was going to be some changes on the site. Those changes being that the renters who were there were notified of the plans to develop, and most of the renters' leases were up in the summer. The remainder and all of the leases were up in February. And so it's my understanding all the leases and all the occupants of this site have been notified and have their stay is over. You know, we don't, I know that's we're talking about mobile homes here, and we're talking about what Missoula's affordable housing stock. And so we don't take lightly that we're moving these out and that there's going to be change in this area. We're very sensitive to that. The landowners are particularly sensitive to that, and they were actually able to relocate one of the tenants to some of their other rental properties. I'm not sure if they've had any more success with that, but then they also looked at seeing some way if these units could be restored and used somewhere else for rentals. And unfortunately, a lot of these older units were just not in condition to be restored or refurbished or reused. And so, yes, we are getting rid of some affordable housing in Missoula, but we're also upgrading Missoula's renting stock, and that's just part of our growth in Missoula. So I don't know. There's not a one-for-one thing you can do when you have that type of change. I guess we just recognize that we're actually increasing the number of units available for rent. We understand that they'll be more expensive by just as a result of new construction and the cost of doing business. But they will be still obtainable units for people to rent. They're going to be high quality, and if you enjoyed, if the pictures spoke to you, then I can kind of see how those buildings would fit on these units just looking at those pictures. I can see how they look, and I think it'll look very good. That's all I had to add right up the beginning. I very much appreciate the approval in the staff report. And we don't take issue with anything in there. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks a lot, Paul. With the owner, would you like to say anything? If you would, you're welcome to speak. It's fine if not as well.
I think it's being pretty well covered.
Okay. Very good. So at this point, we will move into public comment on this. So if we could have the instructions back on the screen for folks who'd like to make a comment on this. So same rules apply as before. If you'd like to make a comment, use the raise hand function in Zoom. If you're on the phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and we'll call folks in the order that you raise your hand. And so I will go on mute and give folks a couple of minutes to find the raise hand button. Okay, first up will be Brian Levon. Correct me if I said that incorrectly, but let's see. Once we give you the floor, you have 3 minutes, Brian.
Hi, it's Brian Levon. I was just curious when construction was planned to start and how long it'll last.
Okay, great. Thanks for the comment, Brian. We'll make sure to address that when planning board members ask questions. So thank you very much. Is that it, or is there anything else you'd like to say?
I think you guys said, so it'll be rentals?
Cool, well, stay tuned, Brian. We'll find out the answer to that question. Thanks. Okay, so next up is Destination Missoula.
Hi there. My name is Holston. I work for Destination Missoula, and I must be logged in under our account. I'm a homeowner on the other side of Shakespeare from the project, and was just wondering, once the rezoning, if the rezoning does actually happen, what is the possibilities for the development project to change course, and could it, could the unit size go up from the current 24 that's proposed? Going from 24 to like the full 38 seems like a market increase. So just curious if that would happen, or if it'd have to come back to kind of public meeting at that point, or city council approval. And then also just curious what kind of traffic considerations are being taken at this point. Shakespeare is a fairly busy street with the bus line on it. And we do have yield signs on Howell. I'm just not sure that don't believe that that's the case on Burton. And there's a bunch of kiddos in this area who are out on bikes and going to and from the school. And so, with at least 29 cars to potentially be added to the neighborhood, that just seems like a lot more traffic action. So just curious kind of what can be done in conjunction with the development, or if there's any coordination with the city as far as traffic concerns go. Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comment. And like the previous speaker, we will make sure to ask these questions in the next section of the meeting. So stay tuned for answers. And thank you again. Okay, we'll give a last call for comments for folks who are viewing on YouTube or otherwise to call in and find the raise hand function in Zoom, or press *9 on your phone. Okay, we have Tristan on the line who'd like to speak. Tristan, if you could say your full name, and then you'll have 3 minutes to give your comment.
Oops.
I think there you go.
Hi, my name is Tristan Dunlap, and I'm a property owner on the opposite side of Defoe Street. And I would just like to make a comment that this side of Defoe Street has gravel parking that leaves space for vehicles to pull in perpendicular to the street. And with the additional units, it would make sense to have finished curb and gutter and designated parking spaces, especially with the additional use that occurs in this area due to the climbing gym and the adjacent facilities, basically catty corner from the new development site. Thank you.
You're muted.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for your comment, Tristan. We will address your question in the questions section of the meeting that's coming up next. So stay tuned. Okay. We'll give 1 more minute for folks who want to call in, since there's a delay between YouTube and the system. I've got to give folks every opportunity here. So last call for comments. Okay, seeing no more folks who'd like to speak, we'll move on to questions from planning board members. So planning board members, this is the time to ask questions that you may have, and if we can also as a group try and remember to convey the questions that were expressed during the public comment period, that would be great. And yeah, so we'll start off. Please use the raise hand function so we can do it in an orderly fashion. Dave, you're first.
Thanks, Vince. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and
clear. All right, thank you. So I have 3 relatively easy questions. And one is, was there any discussion of the developer folks in the neighborhood about re-subdividing to fit single family house lots? You know, my figuring you could, you know, with small lots, even in this zoning, you could probably get 20 individual for sale units there. And that's fine. Just wonder if it ever happened with the neighborhood. What the area that's left out of this development, is that already owned by the owners? Because it looks like 2 leftover houses out of the proposed plan anyway. What's going to happen to that? And then I'm curious about the types of units, modular, stick built, or whatever. Maybe that can, you know, help the discussion.
Vince, do you want me to address those, or?
Yeah, Paul or anyone. Yeah, please do.
Okay, thank you. Paul Forsting, IMEG. Thanks, Dave, for the questions. I wrote them down here, so hopefully I got them right. The first question was re-subdividing or doing a subdivision for sale. That hadn't been discussed with the neighbors. It quite frankly hasn't been on the docket. You know, we've got a family who owns these properties and rents them, and that's their business model, and they do that across in various locations in the city. And so their goal here is just to keep these as rentals. And there are numerous lots already embedded here. I can't remember how many, if it's 12 or 20, but we do have a lot of small 10 lots. So we have 10 lots existing here. And so we do have 10 already, but we never contemplated subdividing them off to create more for sale. The area left off, I'm not exactly sure which one that is. Our application encompasses a whole half block. It's just under an acre at 38,000 something square feet. It's the whole half block. And so I think it's a logical area to rezone. And then the question was, what type of units will these? These will be stick built. They'll look a lot like those pictures that Alex presented, but these will be stick built on foundation, new construction.
Great, thanks. Shane, you're next, and then Micah, you'll be up after.
Yeah, mine's not really a question. I did just want to say that I should probably recuse myself from this vote. That's okay with you, Vince?
Yeah, that sounds good, Shane. If you could recuse yourself, if you could also go into audio only mode, I think that would be appropriate too.
Sure thing.
Just for this, you can come back after we vote. Thanks. Okay, Micah.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple questions of my own, and then I wanted to give voice to the questions that came up in public comment. But the first one, I think maybe what Dave was getting at is on some of the plans, there's a inlaid blue rectangle inside of the block. And I didn't see that explained anywhere. Is there a reason why that zone is separated out?
I can answer that. It was 2 pieces of property and we bought both pieces.
Okay, great. That makes sense. Thanks. The houses on the existing lots, will those also be demolished? Has there been talk of, feasibility of moving those off site? Or is the plan to, demolish the trailer homes and the mobile homes and the houses?
We're going to demolish the house. It's really, really old and not in great shape. I don't think it could be moved. And actually the mobiles, we sort of made an arrangement with a guy and he's hauling them off and he's going to repurpose them up in Ravalli or someplace. So they will be lived in, some of them.
And then the questions, I think I got them all out of the public comment, but when will the construction occur? I think you've confirmed that it's all going to be rentals. And then could this plan change after the rezoning is approved, if it's approved, and what would that process look like?
I can answer those questions. Paul Forsting, IMEG. The schedule for the project is to start immediately. And so we first need rezoning approval before we can get a site plan approved through the city. But we're already working on, or there's efforts in place to get that site plan put together to a position where we could start construction on these units. We haven't talked about the construction schedule. We actually started this project, well, a long time ago, about a year ago. It's been so, and it's taken a while to get to this point. And so I know that I think back a year ago, the plan was to start this year, and I assume the plan is to go this year again too. Will it take longer than a construction season? I think all of it, I think it'll just be done in 1 year, but I'm not 100% sure. And that's maybe Kent could explain how long it might take to get all these units constructed, if that's an important question. A couple other questions that were, what is the possibility of a change in layout? Well, not very likely from what my understanding of what the client wants to do. We're pretty locked in. That you saw the recent change, and it was just an adjustment with the same kind of form, the footprints. That was the only change that's anticipated. But it's in full, honesty, this is a rezone approval, and we're not bound to a site plan necessarily. And so if we had approval, we could shift it around. And the process is good to go through building permit review. There is no other public review process after these hearings take place. And so in that way, you know, if you're saying, well, 24 units is great and 38 units would be bad, you know, there's always a possibility somebody in the world would get it up to 38 units, but that's not the proposal here. You know, I just wanted to be fair. When you do a rezone, it's not just what we're proposing, but there's a possibility that anything within that zoning district could be constructed. Now, since we're working on the site plan, and since I know that this design is moving forward, I feel like there's a very low probability that it will change. Just a lot's been invested in this particular plan, but it certainly could happen. One question that came up that maybe didn't get re-asked me, but I'll just hit on it, is traffic. We don't, you know, on a rezone of this size, there's not much in the way of traffic discussion that goes on that is or isn't, I guess, to people's liking. I can say if we were re-subdividing this site, 24 units wouldn't trigger any type of traffic study or anything, but those requirements don't transfer over to rezoning even, so it's not really an apples to apples thing to say. I would just say that there's a lot of non-motorized transportation options here. There will be an increase of traffic with more units coming in, but you know, the site's going to be developed to have enough parking per the city requirements. The last thing I'll add is that there was a discussion about the offsite, or just how the other side of the road looks. And our site plan is going to improve our parking, but it doesn't necessarily go around and get in the right of way and change everything. We have improvements to make around 360 around our site, but that doesn't. But I'm not sure that we could necessarily propose perpendicular parking and improvements in the right of way without approvals there. And so hopefully I touched on all of the questions that were asked.
Did I cover everything you wanted to ask, Micah, this time?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll go to Caroline next.
Thanks, Vince, and thanks everyone for your presentations. I have two questions. One, was there ever any consideration of building to the full allowable density of 38 units? And second, more of a site plan question, but are you making any considerations for including green infrastructure to mitigate stormwater impacts from the increased density that will come?
Good questions. Kent, I might shoot it over to you and just to talk about if you had talked about doing a more dense layout or more units there. And then I don't know if we've talked about green infrastructure, but I know stormwater management will be an important component of the project.
Yeah, my name is Kent Means from MMW Architects, and I can address that relative to the density. Ultimately, what drives the density is parking, and so essentially we're providing all of the off-street parking along the alley side, and essentially maximizing the amount of parking that we can put in there. So, and that essentially maximizes the amount of units that we can get on, unless we were to do some completely different arrangement, which would potentially be, a parking lot, essentially with a much denser building. And, we didn't feel that was appropriate for this property. And I think it's not something that the developer wanted to do. They wanted to have more of a neighborhood feel with individual buildings that fit the neighborhood. And in order to do that, we wanted buildings that faced the street, had porches, those sorts of things, and had that neighborhood feel. And really the best way to do that was to park along the alley, which essentially capped our density in a lot of ways. So I think that that's how we arrived at that, and I think that's part of the reason we don't imagine that that density changing because of that. So, and maybe I can just address one thing that came up in a earlier discussion about construction. I think that the best case scenario would be that we'd be starting construction mid-June. I think that depends a lot on the building department process and how long that takes. And then, potentially I would say 9 months of construction, somewhere in that range. But we need to review that with our contractor, and haven't had a a lot of discussion about that, but so that's a bit of a guess, but so.
Hey, are there any more questions from planning board members? Okay, well, thank you very much to everyone who presented tonight and joined us. We'll move on to the next section of the meeting where planning board members will discuss among themselves. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so if anyone would like to speak on behalf of the item, please raise your hand. I would like to make a motion to approve or deny the rezone. Please do. Dave.
Hi. So I just want to comment about the rezoning thing about it's a little bit of a pig in a poke, but not from last month. And this case, the density, I think fits well. Findings have been made by staff about how it fits within the growth policy. This project fits the neighborhood intensity, kind of a transition, if you will. And there's already a certain amount of density there. And yes, it's increasing, but this area can handle that traffic. The streets, these are city streets. We're a little bit, as a planning board, out in the, more of an editorial comment, out in the cold about what's actually going to happen in the future. But even within the options available to the developers, let's say somebody else buys it next month, you know, I think the zoning district is appropriate for the location in the city. And I want to give that pitch out there. I think this fits pretty well. That's what.
Great, thanks, Dave. Josh?
Yeah, mine's just a question. There are no conditions of approval for a rezone, right, Vince?
No, well, you can condition the zoning, and staff, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't condition the zoning. So I think there have been situations where the rezoning itself has been conditioned on certain things, but yeah, it has to be zoned to, it's zoned to a standard zoning district that can't be conditioned. I'm seeing nods from Dave. Okay, and yeah, I should just mention, yeah, I think Dave, you kind of expressed it, started to express it, you know, the fact that, you know, John Newman used to remind us of this all the time when he was on the planning board, that when we see rezonings, you know, we really can't and shouldn't consider any development proposals that are tied to the rezone because of the reasons that have been expressed tonight, that we're approving the rezone and really need to consider the characteristics of the zoning in relation to the property as opposed to the proposal, because yeah, anything can happen on the property once it's rezoned in the short term or in the long term. So, Sean, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Vince. So I kind of wanted to clarify that last point about conditioning. So with a rezone, we can't like think about placing a condition on it, like whatever, holding it to the proposed 24 units. Like that's not possible in this instance.
Well, I'd like to hear staff's opinion. I mean, I think my understanding from being here for a few years is that in some limited instances, there's been like a developer agreement that's been signed between the developer and the city to agree to certain conditions, but I think that might be the only option. Dave, could you add to that at all?
Sure. So it's been the city's, you know, from my understanding, I've been working with the city of Missoula for about a year now, and it's my understanding that it's the city's policy that's supported by Montana statute that zoning is either it's an up or down vote. And so the idea is Montana statute talks about zoning districts, and I don't have the citation off the top of my head, but essentially what it says is that that when a zoning district is applied, it's applied, you know, it might be in the Rattlesnake, it might be the same district, might be the Rattlesnake, it might be on the west side, it might be in another location in the city of Missoula, and the rules are uniform. So what that means is, I guess, no, we do not, when we modify zoning, we do not have certain conditions of approval. You know, I think in some cases, a developer can propose a development agreement when it might be, you know, there might be reason not to approve the zoning because you're concerned about whether the zoning is appropriate for a particular location. And so the developer might want to provide assurance to the city to say, all right, this is the plan that we intend to execute. And so these are the stipulations we're willing to make. We're willing to bind ourselves to a particular development plan. But in most cases, it's, you know, uniform, whether it's, you know, if it's a B2, like I said, in, you know, the Brooks area, it's the same B2 that is provided in another area of the city. So we don't typically require, there are no conditions of approval or development agreements normally.
Great, thanks for that explanation, Dave. Does that satisfy you, Sean? Your question?
Yeah, absolutely. That clarifies that for sure. Thank you.
Okay. We'll go to Josh.
Thanks, Vince. It looks like there are 4 different zoning districts that seem to maybe make sense in this location according to the growth policy. You know, what was the thought process behind selecting B11 versus B21, B22, or the other option? I think it was a limited industrial and residential. They all allow the same density, right? You know, was there a reason why this seemed to be the best fit?
Yeah, Alex or Dave or Paul, feel free to chime in.
Probably should have asked this before we.
That's totally fine, Josh.
You know what? I'll I can answer it, and Alex can correct me where I'm wrong. Paul Forsting, IMEG. We initially proposed the M1R2, which is one of the acceptable zoning districts. And that's what I presented at the neighborhood meeting, and that's what we thought we were going with. That's what the adjacent zoning is. And the planning department recommended that we go to the B1-1. I think it's the least intensive of the options. Is that correct, Alex? And height and
That's correct. Yeah, the M1R-2 would allow more industrial uses. And given that it is kind of, there's industrial nearby, but it's not really an area that's intended to have that sprawl towards more of the residential. So the B11 allows all the same residential building types as the other ones offered, but it kind of limits it a little bit more, one in height and also in just different allowed uses for that district, where B2-1 and B2-2 and then M1R-2 allow more. So it's kind of allowing more flexibility, but keeping it semi-limited.
Okay. Well, I think this is a really good project or proposal to rezone this. The neighborhood is changing. We've seen it, have a lot of changes in recent years, and sort of the gradual infill of projects that bring more units and more variety of uses to the neighborhood. I guess in full disclosure, I live a few blocks from the neighborhood and work even closer. Mountain Lines maintenance, operations, and administration building is just to the north there at the end of Shakespeare Street. So yeah, parking's in. I think having said that, it's I really did appreciate hearing all the efforts that have been done by the owner and the developer to work with the folks, the people who live currently in the homes on the property, to give them full notice. It doesn't seem like anyone's going to be surprised by if development occurs this year, and surprised by what will happen to their existing home. At the same time, it's a little, it's a tough place I think we're in. I think, Paul, you explained the variety of different factors that affecting housing affordability that result from redevelopment like this. And I think it's right, at the same time, this will increase the number of units in our community, housing units, which is badly needed. But it will also replace lower cost units with higher cost units. And so there's a term for that. We don't usually use it in Missoula or haven't until recently, but it's called gentrification. And in places that are quickly gentrifying in our country, new units tend to increase the price of housing. So I expect that to happen, and for a long time. But at the same time, we need the housing units. So yeah, I'm going to support it with those qualifications myself. So would someone like to make a motion, or if there's no more comments or questions, I'd like to see a motion and maybe we could get the motion on the screen if staff could put the recommended motion for us. Thank you, Alex. Okay, feel free to continue with comments and discussion, but if anyone is so inclined to make the affirmative motion that was recommended by staff, it's here on the screen for you to read.
Yeah, I can make the motion. So I move to approve the adoption of an ordinance to rezone the subject properties located at 1315, 1319, 1321, 1321 and a half, 1323, 1325, and 1327 Defoe Street, 1127 and 1131 Shakespeare Street, and 1120 Burton Street, and legally described as lots 1 through 10 in block 61 of the school edition, located in section 16, township 13 north, and range 19 west, PMM from RT 2.7 2-unit/townhouse to B1-1 neighborhood business.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Micah. Thank you, Jim. So we'll have discussion on the motion before we go to a vote. Are there any last comments the folks would like to make before we call a vote on the motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, it's undetermined. So we will do a roll call vote. Donna, could you please do a roll call vote on the motion?
Sean McCoy.
Aye.
Sean McCoy votes aye. Dave Loomis.
Aye.
Dave Loomis votes aye. Micah Sewell.
Aye.
Micah Sewell votes aye. Josh Schrader.
Aye.
Josh Schrader votes aye. Toon Pham.
Aye.
Toon Pham votes aye. Jim Bashand.
Aye.
Jim Bashand votes aye. Caroline Lauer.
Aye.
Caroline Lauer votes aye. Vince Caristo.
Aye.
Vince Caristo votes aye. Mr. Chair, motion passes.
Thank you very much. Should have been easier to decipher a unanimous vote there. Okay, well, thank you very much, Paul and Alex and Dave and everyone else who joined. Yeah, thank you very much. Take care. So we'll move on now to the next item on the agenda. We don't have any communications or special presentations. There are no committee reports. Great, so on old business, we have here continuing our dialogue, the first on US Highway 93. I think we said the last meeting during our discussion period that we put this on as old business on the agenda to continue moving along discussion about engaging with MDT potentially on doing something. So I apologize if I committed to doing something. I don't remember what it was, but I'll look up after the meeting. Josh, do you recall?
Vince, I was tasked with going to the TPCC and requesting the MDT meeting.
Okay, great. So that meeting's coming up today, or that was today, Shane?
We had it today, yeah.
Great.
Would you like to report now?
Say what? Yeah, why don't you tell us how that went at this point?
Sure. I did make the request. Jacqueline, who is the MDT person that's on the TVCC board, had to leave early, but Vicky was there in her stead, and Vicky has passed the request along to her folks. So I don't have an update for you other than the request has been passed along, and I have gotten confirmation that they are trying to get somebody to come and chat with us. So
Great, thank you, Shane. They were amenable, it sounded like, but we didn't get an answer. Apologize for that. That's my cat's food going off. Josh?
Yeah, I think I was also tasked with pulling just together some thoughts about, why we thought it was an issue worth looking into. And so I've started to do that. I also went on to the Department of Transportation's, I think it's their website, and downloaded some pretty comprehensive crash data. And it allows you through pivot tables to look at the number of crashes, and it ranks them, categorizes them from, no injury, other injury, serious injury, fatality. And you can select from county to county. So I looked at traffic from Ravalli County to Missoula County. To my knowledge, there's not really any other good way to get from Ravalli to Missoula except for 93, I don't think. And it just looks like the trend is increasing number of all crashes over time from Ravalli to Missoula County. So the data only goes through 2019, so we don't have 2020. So that was, interesting. I think not surprising, but interesting. And then, I'm certainly no traffic expert, but between Missoula and Lolo, there's that large median, there's that center lane, which provides some safety. And then there's also the Jersey Rail, the center median, for a portion of it too, which can help prevent head-on crashes. But south of Lolo to Florence, to the county line, there's 18 inches of yellow lines, and that's it. And there's increasing traffic just continually, it seems. I don't know the law. I don't believe it's illegal to drive in the left-hand lane, even if you're not passing. So there appears to be just a lot of traffic in both lanes, not using that left-hand lane for just passing and then moving over to the right. And there's a lot of driveways in and out of that, of 93. And there's no frontage roads. There's no, logical movement traffic to access 93. And just, for all those reasons, it seems really dangerous from a, untrained perspective.
Josh, is Florence in Missoula County or is it in Ravalli?
So Florence really is, it's not a township, it's an unincorporated community. Some of the Florence school district is in Missoula County.
Okay.
So the northern part of the Florence school district is in Missoula County.
Great.
And I would say a significant amount of the population lives in Missoula County.
Okay, right. Yeah, of course, we're all really kind of one community in a lot of ways. Yeah. Well, thanks for looking into that, Josh. And please, keep us updated if as you continue your research here. I think it's.
I'd be happy to share the data. I don't know how best to do that, but yeah, I'd be happy to send the Excel spreadsheet along for other people to play with and look at. It's interesting.
Yeah, that would be great. If you want to, maybe we can chat on email on how to do that at a future meeting. It might be, keeping this as an old business item on a future agenda. So we'd have a placeholder to attach documents and things like that. So. Okay, and so I think I'll give it also an update here. It's not under old business, but maybe it should have been. So last meeting we had passed a motion to ask the Missoula Board of County Commissioners to create a commission to look at restoring Grant Creek. And county staff have begun talking about what the best way to achieve that would be. So what the exact precise request should be of the county commissioners to fit in with all the existing work and commissions that are already sort of on the edges of this issue. So we'll hear more at a future meeting about what that'll look like and what that letter will look like. So.
Yeah, Vince.
Any questions about that? Josh? Yeah.
Sure. I was going to say, I mentioned that too. I wasn't able to attend the Conservation District meeting this month. I submitted a report, and you know, one of the tools that we could think about is, you know, for the restoration part of Grant Creek is the use of 310 permits, and you know, having them, however that's done, you know, request a 310 permit and submit a plan for the Conservation District to look at.
Can you explain? I'm not familiar with 310 permits, Josh.
Yeah, so, and I'm not all that well versed in it either, to be perfectly honest, but that is a permit that is required when any work is to take place, whether it's clearing of shrubbery or reinforcing the stream bank, anything that occurs within the waterway or the riparian area. There's not a defined setback or buffer area. You know, it depends on the size of the waterway, you know, whether it's a small creek, perennial creek, or a larger, you know, like the Clark Fork. So it's a permit that is required that must be approved by the Conservation District for any work to take place in those areas.
Okay, great. And there would have to be some kind of plan or document to establish the boundaries of that area in order to set that permitting process in place.
Yeah, they generally have to come up with a plan and say, you know, how are they going to vegetate the stream bank? How, you know, what path is the stream going to take? I'm not sure if I'm correct. I don't believe this portion of Grant Creek is under the jurisdiction of the Conservation District right now, simply because it's not really a creek anymore. It's so degraded. I don't even know that it qualifies, you know. But that could be potentially, I think, a tool to make sure that it's restored. And the plan looks great, but to make sure that it's restored appropriately, and the Conservation District has, you know, I guess, oversight in how that is going to be executed. And those guys are experts, they're hydrology experts, and they're, you know, a publicly elected board, and so they generally, I think, do pretty good work.
Great. Well, thanks for bringing that up with that board, Josh. And yeah, this is another item that we'll continue to hear more about in the future, I think, as it develops. So any other questions about watershed in Grant Creek? Okay. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is comments from planning board members. So if there's anything that you all would like to say tonight, this is the time. So we'll go with Caroline.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I wanted to let you all know that I submitted my resignation to the planning board last week. I just took a job with Missoula County as the climate resilience coordinator, who's located in CAPS. And so while there's no formal rule or law that says that an employee of the county can't be a member of the planning board, it would be a little awkward just being in front of colleagues presenting, and it could be that I would be presenting in front of you at some point. The resiliency plan presented in front of the planning board, gosh, like a year and a half ago now. So just to avoid any conflicts of interest or awkwardness or strangeness, I submitted my resignation, and my last meeting will be our next meeting, I think April 6th. And then I will be gone and maybe see you on the other end. And I'm sad to leave before my term is over, but it's been really wonderful serving with you all. And I look forward to interacting in other ways in the future.
Caroline, it's sorry to see you go, Caroline. It's been great to serve with you. Yeah, it's been, you've had such a great attention to detail and always had a great perspective on things, often seeing things in ways that I don't. So I really appreciated that time. And yeah, but congratulations on your job. It sounds like a great fit for you. And yeah, perhaps we will see you here in a different way in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, Dave, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Vince. Not a board member, but David Grandpré with City of Missoula staff. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update as to some of the things that you've seen and that might be forthcoming. The McNett Flats subdivision project that you saw, I think it was last month, was recently granted preliminary approval by the Missoula City Council. They did make use of your recommendations, though. You had all recommended, you were thinking about, Caroline, I think in particular, was thinking about bike lanes, separated bike lanes along an east-west road that is likely to connect to development to the east, and how trying to separate pedestrian bicycle traffic from the main kind of vehicular roadways. And so that proposal specifically wasn't adopted, but what was adopted was there was a different trail network that was a trail that was then proposed essentially along the southern boundary of the property, but you kind of all spurred it on. And so I guess what I'm trying to say, and so that will help to kind of alleviate the pedestrian and bicycle type concerns along a main roadway. And so I guess what I'm trying to tell you is your work did not go unnoticed. It helped to kind of further the discussion and produce some, I think, positive outcomes that would benefit pedestrians, bicyclists, and also benefit landowners to the south. You might recall that there's single family type residential development to the south of this project, so it will provide an additional buffer. So I think that was very positive. And then for those of you who were here about probably 6 or 8 months ago, we reviewed a multifamily project at 2920 Expo Parkway. So that's right at the mouth of Grant Creek. And ultimately that was denied by City Council. That was a multifamily development. It was a rezoning. And it was denied by City Council. That will be coming back. We've been working with the developer a little bit just in the very beginning stages. They kind of have to get to the back of the line, but they'll be coming back with a rezoning application. They're still looking at multifamily, but hopefully, and I think they're making some changes that are addressing some of the concerns that were expressed during that process, like things like hopefully again, pedestrian and bicycle type facilities, addressing fire protection and some other issues that emerged at that point. So it's still a few months out, but it'll be coming back around to your plate here at some point. And then also we're in some preliminary discussions at the city level about some developments within the Mullen area or Switupcane plan. And so I think, we're still a little ways out, but you'll be seeing some projects, and it's going to be really interesting to see, to review some of the projects under this, new form-based code. But we'll be seeing some development applications here within the next. It might not be 6 months till it reaches your inbox, but in any event, there's a lot happening. So you'll be busy if you're still willing to participate.
Great, thanks for that update, Dave. It's really great to hear kind of where these things go and how they're decided on by council and the board of county commissioners. So thank you. Are there any questions for Dave while we've got him on those items?
I had a question about the McNett Flats. I just took a quick look at the approval, and it looked like they had changed some of the parklands dedication to address concerns of the neighbors and surrounding folks. Could you tell us a little bit about that, Dave?
Sure. So what ultimately ended up happening, it was a bit of a moving target. The developer had proposed either, number one, all cash in lieu of parkland. That was the developer's preferred alternative. Option number two that staff had recommended was that it be kind of a 50-50 split, that there'd be 50% cash in lieu of parkland that could go to acquiring a larger park area within this kind of region, and then also that there be significant parkland on the site. And so the developer was kind of concerned, about how this might work. The lots, what would have ended up happening was it would have ended up being about half of a couple of lots dedicated to parkland. And so the developer didn't think that was a great option. So the developer was actually pretty creative, I thought. And so proposed that there would be a trail easement. I don't know if I can pull it up. I don't think I can, actually. My internet's a little bit slow right now for some reason. But in any event, what the developer proposed was to pursue a greater trail easement on this temporary trail. So it's on the south side of the property, which is part of the build grant. So it's a planned facility and part of the build grant. So provide a larger area. And that would be, 40 foot roughly buffer. And so that could include not only the trail, but it would also include maybe some picnic benches or some, definitely street trees or street trees on both sides of that, north and south. So it could be, kind of a nice buffer to area to the south. And then also provide cash in lieu for the remainder. So it ended up, the parkland dedication requirement was about just over 3 acres. The developer proposed to dedicate it's about 0.9 acres in easements, so that would help to meet it, and then cash in lieu for the rest. But in addition, this is actually, this is where I think the developer did a good job in that it gets a little confusing, but when we have multifamily development in the city, there's activity area that's required. And so that could be lots of different things. It could be garden area. It could be green space on a particular lot. It's like a tot lot or a playground or something like that. And it's not typically, when you go through subdivision review, that requirement is usually met through the subdivision requirements. But in this case, it was it's a business district. It's a B1 type district. And so it could be business, it could be residential. And so the developer agreed to essentially, if it's going to be a residential development on one of these particular lots, they would meet the activity area requirements in addition to meeting the parkland requirements. Which is, in my opinion, a little bit over and above kind of what would be required. And so I think that was to me, it was kind of a win-win. I know that the neighbors are a little bit concerned about what might be developed on the property. Again, like I mentioned, it's single family type residential to the south. Our growth policy recommends mixed use on these lots. And so, but in any event, so there's the trail easement, there's cash in lieu, and then thirdly, if multifamily is developed, then there'll be activity area as well on each of those lots to provide open space, recreational area for those lots.
Great, thanks, Dave.
Great, thanks again, Dave. Okay, any other comments that folks would like to make tonight before we adjourn?
I had one quick comment for Dave.
Yeah, please.
Dave, do you know if there is a subdivision coming down the pike called Creighton subdivision?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. We had a 310 inquiry on our agenda at the Conservation District last month. So just, they asked if I could make the request to see if we knew if that was coming down the pike. I didn't see it on our agenda that I think Bailey shared with us. So thanks.
It might be in the county.
Maybe.
Okay. Well, before we adjourn, I should go back. I skipped over committee reports, but I want to give Shane, was there anything else you wanted to report on tonight from the TPCC meeting that occurred?
Sure. So the Highway 200 East was approved today through in the TPCC, and we got another update on the long-range transportation plan. It's just going in iterations here. So it was another step after. So it's another step after we've seen it last, and they've been refining their scopes on the proposed upgrades and what's still out in the future. And then there was just an administrative approval of they call it amendment number 4, and it's regarding the Russell Street between Idaho and Montana, I believe. It was just some small cost overruns that were administrative. So that's all we reviewed.
Great, thank you for that report, Shane. Okay, well, with that, thanks everyone tonight. We'll adjourn the meeting and yeah, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.